Welcome on into the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and it is time to go over the Week 2 running back rankings, which you can find up on my website, www.theffforge.com. There's a link down in the description to, if not the website, then to all the individual web pages where the rankings are held once those get posted, which will be Wednesday evening. You can also find them live, updated. They will get updated throughout the week. Sometimes I wake up 12 hours later, or I'm looking at these 12 hours later, and I'm like, why did you do that, you dumb? That didn't make sense. So they do get updated based on information that comes in as well, of course. Thursday evenings, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, same time Saturday evenings. I'm here live on YouTube for any start-sit questions, trade questions, just to hang out, football questions in general, all the above. I'm here, and Sunday mornings, 2 hours prior to kickoff, I'm here as well for your start-sit questions. Now, I meant to do this with each position, so the wide receiver video as well, but I forgot to. I just want to let you know, go look back to Week 1 of 2023 as a reminder to relax. Things happen. Good players have bad days. Bad players have good days. Week 1, it's all the more heightened because we haven't, it's our only little data point that we have to work with. So here's some poor performances from fantasy players who finished well last season. Joe Mixon had 8.8 fantasy points. Rachaad White had 5.9 fantasy points. And Jahmyr Gibbs had 7 fantasy points. And here's some good performances from bad players. And it'll make sense why I'm putting that in quotes here in just a second. But Tyler Algier had 22.9 fantasy points Week 1 last year. Remember that? Everybody was super concerned about Bijan. I think Bijan owners still weren't happy by the end of the season, but, averted a crisis there if that would have been continuing through after Week 1. And then Alexander Mattison had 11.9 fantasy points Week 1. He wasn't even the starter by, not too far into the season. And Aaron Jones had 25.7 fantasy points. I say Aaron Jones isn't a bad fantasy player, but he did finish, I believe it was running back 27, maybe, be average fantasy points per week last year. So I just wanted to point that out. It was like a 10-point average fantasy points per week finish compared to that 25.7 fantasy point, start. So just going to point out that, this is one little data point out of many more. Don't freak out too hard. But also, react, as I always say. Don't overreact. So a little recap of my loves and my fades last week. If you're new to the channel, if you're not familiar, loves, fades, it's no different than starts and sits, and you can figure out which one is which. Last week, not my most impressive week. I'm going to be a little bit generous with awarding myself points here, whatever. I gave myself a half of a star out of 2 stars for my loves. For the running back position, I give 2 loves, 2 fades. So, the first love of mine was James Cook, and he did fine. He finished as the running back 24. So if I did better with my other love, even like a half as decent, maybe I just would have said, well, I did okay with 2 guys. But no, my next one's really embarrassing, so I almost gave myself a full point for this, whatever. We'll do a half point here, but I'm taking the victories that I can get here for the running backs. The other love of mine was Jahmyr White. So that was a big fat disappointment. And then this week he's facing Baltimore. So, I'm sorry to those that I need to apologize to. And for the fades, I'm giving myself 1.5 out of 2 stars here. I did better than I thought. So here's where I do think that things got a little bit weird last week. Kyren Williams finished as the running back 22, which was, quite a bit lower than where he's getting ranked, of course. So that's why I'm giving myself a half of a victory here, much like I gave myself a half of a victory with James Cook. But much like Cook's running back 24 finish, which, love 24 finish, fade 22 finish here. I'm stretching. I'm giving myself maybe it should be a half a point combined between the two. And then Najee Harris was my other fade, so that one worked out. Running back 33. I don't know that I get any kind of Medal of Honor for that fade, but I did warn you if you played him. That's to bring us on to the rankings here, and we'll go through this with my tiers. And part of what I like to remind you about sometimes is these tiers are there mostly to kind of help to inform you of these are within the range that any changes that I make this week will probably happen within those tiers. Much more rarely do they switch, unless of course they're like a border guy, but that's where the biggest swings can happen, is within a tier. So my first tier here starts off with running back Saquon Barkley. For the second week in a row, I will have him as my RB1, followed by Jahmyr Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor, Isaiah Pacheco, Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall, James Conner, and Kyren Williams. A couple of notes here, so you see I have a little asterisk here. I'll get rid of that now. For Jahmyr Gibbs, usually I use that for injuries, but not this time. I just wanted to make sure I didn't forget. I wrote a little note for Jahmyr Gibbs. Detroit has the highest expected point total based on initial Vegas odds, and Tampa Bay allowed 7 receptions for a total of 101 yards to running backs last week. That was against Washington. That is going to be an area that you will often see that system utilize their running backs in the passing game, so that is something to remember. But still, 7 receptions for 101 yards. Something was exploited there against Tampa Bay. And Detroit is going to see that on tape, and they very well could try to attack that same thing that Washington attacked successfully. And, out of the 2 running backs in Detroit, who can do that better but Jahmyr Gibbs? So I think it could be a really, really explosive week for Jahmyr Gibbs, and I'm loving him. So then we have some guys who, I'm going to take Isaiah Pacheco here as the example. I want you to comment on things. I don't want to discourage that. So go right ahead, comment on things. But just, maybe have a little bit of humility. Instead of saying my ranking sucks, like somebody said my ranking on Devon Achane last week was way too high, with a lot of emphasis on way too high. Look, what did he finish as the running back 6 last week in half PPR? So I guess not. Just a reminder, don't fret about who I have ranked 4th. If I have somebody ranked 4th, that pretty much certainly means that everybody is starting them. They're going to have a 99.7% start percentage, okay? It doesn't matter who I have ranked 4th and 8th. It matters who I have ranked 34th and 24th. Those are the guys that people actually ask questions about for start-sit questions. Those are the guys who people are actually considering sitting or starting. So I really don't care how accurate I am up with my top 10 running backs. It just doesn't matter. You're starting these guys. Everybody's starting these guys. And that's might not be including James Conner. You could have gotten James Conner late enough, and that's why I am making him one of my loves this week. I have him higher if he had been utilized more last week. I think it was a 67% snap share for him, so that's a little bit low. It's not ridiculously low. It's perfectly fine. But his split was larger in previous years than it was this year, getting eaten into a little bit, and that's not totally unexpected. Regardless, the Los Angeles Rams allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to running backs a week ago. Now, counterpoint to that, they did face off against the Detroit Lions, and that game also went into overtime, and a running back did happen to score a lot of fantasy points in that overtime as well. So, big counterpoint to that, but that did happen, and the Cardinals have the 9th highest expected point total via early betting odds, so that also works in favor here. I'm thinking both teams here with Los Angeles Rams, with all of their injuries and everything, this could be a pretty run-heavy game between Arizona and the Rams on both sides there. So that's going to bring us on to my second tier of running backs, which goes all the way down to running back 15. Starts off at running back 9 with Devon Achane, followed by Joe Mixon, J.K. Dobbins, Derrick Henry, James Cook, Brian Robinson Jr., and to round this tier out at running back 15, I have Jordan Mason. First off, I am not ranking Kamara, Caffrey. Who the hell's Caffrey? I don't know. Obviously, I meant McCaffrey. I say Caffrey again. I don't know. Not ranking Caffrey right now. I am ranking Kamara. Don't worry, Kamara owners. So McCaffrey is day-to-day. Very well could come back next week. But for now, I'm ranking Jordan Mason because if McCaffrey returns, he's in that group of guys who it doesn't matter if I have him 1st or 5th. You're starting him anyways. Who the freaking cares? So there you go. That is the reason I have Jordan Mason ranked is because in the event that he plays, that's the actual scenario is do you start him or do you not start him? So I just found that more important to get out here into the ether. So Devon Achane and his counterpart, Raheem Mostert, both got banged up. I actually noticed both of their injuries. Well, did I notice Raheem? I don't know. I noticed Devon Achane when he got injured. Both got banged up. Concerning, yes, of course. They are both injury concerns. This is why I had Jalen Wright on both of my rosters initially. And Jeff Wilson's probably viable. I don't know what's going to happen this early in the season if they're both down. Well, if they're both down, I think it's Jeff Wilson and Jalen Wright. If one of them goes down, maybe it's Jeff Wilson for Raheem Mostert, Jalen Wright for Devon Achane. That could make a lot of sense. But it might be Jeff Wilson for both currently. The rookie might need to learn some more. So we're keeping an eye on this situation. I think right now it's an abundance of they've sat 2 practices, so that is not nothing, but I think it's an abundance of caution here. Short week, 2 guys who have injury history. I think they're being careful. They both played throughout the entirety of the game, so I think it's okay. At least I think Raheem Mostert finished the game healthy. Maybe not, because Jeff Wilson did end up coming in. I thought that was just kind of because Raheem Mostert wasn't being very effective type of deal. Who knows? Joe Mixon, J.K. Dobbins. Here we go. J.K. Dobbins is my second love of the week. Both of these guys, rather high for putting them in the love start category, but both of these guys, you could have some competition on your rosters when deciding whether or not you're going to start them. When it comes to J.K. Dobbins, obviously he had a great week 1. I've been, on top of J.K. Dobbins all off season. I got a little bit lower on him, but was still higher than consensus. And what this comes down to here is a certain amount of faith in J.K. Dobbins, and that last week wasn't some sort of mirage, something that I could point out, next year in terms of guys who had big weeks and then didn't do anything throughout the rest of the season. Hopefully, no injury. J.K. Dobbins will continue this, but you put him up against Carolina. Any week that there is a running back who is not a must-start that's going up against the Carolina Panthers, as of now, they're probably going to be one of my loves. It's that simple. This is a very, very good matchup against Carolina. For J.K. Dobbins, going to have plenty of opportunities here this week. Again, I love in that situation. And Jordan Mason, we'll see. But, solid enough matchup there that I'm not afraid of anything. That's going to bring us on to my third tier, which looks like this. And it starts off with my running back 16, Josh Jacobs, followed by Kenneth Walker, the third, Ramondre Stevenson, Alvin Kamara. Sorry, let me get that mouse out of there. Travis Etienne Jr., Rachaad White, Najee Harris, and it finishes off with my running back 23, David Montgomery, who I wasn't sure if I wanted him in this tier or the next one. Kind of weird to finish off a tier with a guy who I have am fading, but there is a bit of a drop off here, and there is a path to another big David Montgomery game here against Tampa Bay. I'm not going to deny that, but I'm going with game flow, and I explained about Jahmyr Gibbs what I liked about him this week, and that would obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously, but that could very well limit David Montgomery's usage. They might just find that Jahmyr Gibbs is a better matchup against Tampa Bay and where they struggle against the run. And David Montgomery could very well, struggle himself just running up the gut, and they might opt to eventually just keep Jahmyr Gibbs out there. And I expect another reason why they might keep Jahmyr Gibbs out there, that this is going to be a pretty evenly matched game. I think there's going to be a lot of back and forth here early on in the season. Once that Detroit defense figures itself out, if it can, their secondary, then maybe I wouldn't say so later on in the season. But for now, with how Tampa Bay looked in week 1 especially, I think there's a very good chance of this being a high-scoring, back-and-forth game, and that should give a lot of opportunities, and David Montgomery very well could fall in the end zone for 2 touchdowns, and that's why I kept him into this tier. That's going to bring us on to my next tier here. We're going to go pretty deep into the running back, so I'll start talking about him a little bit less. My running back 24, I have Tony Pollard. 25, we've got Aaron Jones. 26, Jerome Ford. 27, I have Raheem Mostert here. For somebody who was pretty high up on Raheem Mostert, one of the guys who after 1 week, I'm like, oh God, did I screw up? It's possible. So we'll see. Also, he's got the injury tag on him, but for now, I don't let that impact where I rank guys, because that's just confusing. I either want to rank a guy if he's playing as if he's playing or not. And for now, I'm not even like expecting a limited workload or anything. I shouldn't say it didn't affect it. I did put Jerome Ford ahead of Raheem Mostert due to Raheem Mostert's injury. Maybe he gets used a little bit less or is a little bit less effective due to being just a little bit hampered. That's kind of where I drew that line. And then Zach Moss going up against Kansas City. I think there's plenty of upside there, but, we'll see. That's going to bring us on to this next tier of running backs from running back 29 through 32. I don't always go this deep, or this would be where I cut off, but I'm going to go a little bit deeper. We still have one of my fades down the road, and I think there's a lot of question marks once we get into this territory. So here is my big question mark territory, essentially. DeAndre Swift, the usage, was not pretty in week 1. Going up against Houston here, we'll see. I'm not giving up on that, that's for sure. I mean, there's still plenty of upside, but week 1 was not promising. Devin Singletary, this is me liking Devin Singletary a lot here at running back 30. Going up against Washington could be a week where he could find some success, and that's why I have him up ahead of Zamir White, who's going up against Baltimore, and coming off of a bad week 1, another one of those I'm sorry's. And then Javonte Williams here, a better offense might think about things differently, but not, Bo Nix going up against this Pittsburgh defense, easy to imagine why it might not be a very pretty week, again, for that entire offense. So I'm not too excited about that, but there's a certain amount of work that we can anticipate, and I'm still going to, take a risk on if my running back room says that I have to. So it brings us on to my final tier that we're going to show. I'll show you 2 more tiers here just because. But running back 33, I have Justice Hill. Running back 34, I've got Gus Edwards going up against Carolina, so very optimistic about that. And Justice Hill, I'm not like super optimistic, but just based on what we saw in week 1, he deserved this spot here against Las Vegas, a defense that I think will be better against the run than it was in week 1, but was, I think, bottom 3, was it? Fantasy points allowed to the running back position in week 1. It wasn't pretty. And then Austin Eckler here going up against the New York Giants is a fade for me, and you might say, well, why is that? New York Giants kind of stink. This should be a good situation for him, but and also, why am I fading somebody so low? So I do assume most leagues, most teams are not in a position where they're considering playing Austin Eckler. You might have turned the video off by now, but there are some out there that may need this warning, and for you, I'm here for you. I expect Washington has a good chance to take a lead in this game and hold on to it against the New York Giants, which would make this a Brian Robinson game, not an Austin Eckler game. It's really just that simple game flow, and we'll finish this off. My final tier of somewhat possible relevance: Ezekiel Elliott, Jaleel McLaughlin, and Chase Brown, so you don't have to go online to find out where I might have had Zeke and Chase ranked after those week 1 performances. So there you go. Those are my running backs for week 2 of the season. No more notes. That's it. Peace out.